Hey, so I just wanted to do a grand overview of my workflow for making game assets. I've been primarily making them for VR, but what I'm showing here applies to any game engine and any project that's sort of going for this sort of PBR style. This isn't going to be a super detailed tutorial, it's just a big picture. It takes the culmination of teaching myself for years and hundreds of hours of watching tutorials and talking to people who work making AAA games. I myself am just a freelance 3D artist, so if you see something that I can improve, feel free to tell me. I would love to hear it. But I'm confident that this can give people a good idea on how to make optimized game assets that also look pretty great. This is my Pip-Boy fan art. I've been watching Fallout, and it's at around 8K tries. I'm pretty happy with it for a hero prop for 8K tries and two materials. The screen's a separate material from the body just because I'm going to be doing some UI stuff with a friend. Um, Things to note when starting a project like this is when we finish, we always want the try count and material count to be as low as possible. There's a lot more to optimization than that, but those are the main two things. I started in Blender with the high poly. It's where you can get your hands dirty and mix all the techniques. I've used sub D, sculpting, booleans, cloth sim. You can just go wild. Um, Turns out the Pip-Boy is actually kind of great for showing off a lot of different modeling techniques. Like this is sub D, this is a cloth sim. I've used a little bit of sculpting here and there, but mostly sub D and booleans. The main goal here is building up all the complex shapes and making it look pretty. It doesn't matter if it's the wrong scale, it doesn't matter if it's 100,000 tries, but you're trying to get most of the shapes you're going for, even if they're built out of smaller, simpler shapes. It's totally fine to do that at this stage. Because what we're going to do is we're going to retop it and build up a low poly. So the retop is basically making the model again, but with clean topology and a much reduced triangle count. There are a lot of add-ons that can make this part suck less. Retopo Flow is awesome. I would recommend it. But for certain shapes, you do have to make the low poly part by hand, more or less. Retopo Flow is really great for organic shapes. Um, and if you know how to use it, you can make this step go faster using the decimate modifier. You can see that's what I did here for the cloth. A lot of people use this modifier wrong, and it's basically the devil. But if you know how to make a deal with him, you can get some pretty decent results. And it just so happens that a really puffy cloth sim like this can do fine with it. So I'll see here, I just used collapse mode and I drag this down. For a good portion of this, sort of using the subdivision and or the decimate modifier in collapse mode, it still looks pretty much the same, but your mileage may vary. And also, you should really only use this before you do anything with textures, vertex groups, anything like that, shape keys. Don't ever use that on something that already has textures or shape keys or vertex groups. It's going to just make your life hell. The next step is making a good UV map. The good news is that if you've done a good retop and your topology is really clean and as low poly as possible, this step's kind of easier. I was kind of lazy with this UV map. It's a lot of just taking a specific part of it and doing cube projection, or a few of these things have seams. This one has seams, and I made sure to clean it up and sort of put it into a rectangle, which helps a lot. But recently, Blender's UV tools finally got the options to pack islands, which means basically Blender's UVs are actually usable. You can do pack islands from the UV menu, or I always hit F3 because I memorize the names of them like a weirdo. But this gives you the option to do exact shape packing before everything was bounding boxes. This UV map is honestly kind of lazy, but what matters is that it has decent textile density, and a good way to check textile density is just by using a texture. So I've got a texture in here, It's just a test texture I found off of Google, and I'm pretty sure in my shading, yeah, I just have it cranked up to 10, so I have 10 of them side by side, and this just lets me see sort of what the relative textile density is in different areas, and it can allow you to find some issues. Um, these squares on the inside, on the cloth, are kind of warped, and they're kind of larger than the squares on the outside, but that's actually okay. We want that because it's okay for this interior to have lower detail. It's usually going to not be seen. So we don't want to be wasting a whole bunch of texture space on this inside part where most of the time nobody's going to see it because it's going to be covered up by a character's arm. So once we've got that done and we can set up our bake groups and move over to Marmaset. So you can bake maps in Blender, but it is not a good time. It really sucks. And it comes down to the fact that Blender is not made as a baking tool. That's not like its primary function. Marmoset Toolbag's primary function is basically baking. It also does rendering, and I'm pretty sure you can do texturing in it, but it is like, it's properly made for baking. You set up all these baking groups by naming, and it'll automatically put them together. For example, here we have our main baking group, and it has a bunch of parts on the high poly, but it all just goes onto this one mesh in the low poly. You can also set up skew, so it doesn't always wrap things where it's pointing directly out of the normals. It kind of wraps the normals around curves by default, which is, or actually, it looks like it mostly does like sort of bent normals. I don't know. But the point is, like, it works great for most things, but not for everything. So any of these like little normal hairs you see pointing out in red, I've painted on here. So I've gone to paint skew. Ignore this; it doesn't mean anything. I mean, it does. This is this is the map we're painting on, but we can just paint on the 3D model here. So if I were to hit Control and paint this out, you see it causes some issues here. So these normals are pointing at an angle to this surface, as you can see. They're sort of painting like to the right, and that's causing this to look all gross. If we paint in where we want it to point straight out, that normal looks a lot better. It projects it straight onto the face as opposed to at that awkward angle. This is absolutely a step where the more time you spend in Blender setting up your bake groups, the better, the faster this step will go. After I bake all my maps, I do all my texturing in Substance Painter. This is where all the juicy details of the high poly really get to shine. I've baked all of these maps that Substance, usually people will do this in Substance itself. You can do them in external programs and just import them into Substance, but these are all the data maps. So they're like bent normals. Position has been giving me some weird issues, but it's not too much of a hard time to just bake only that one in Substance Painter. But you can just import them and slot them in down here. That'll tell Substance everything it needs to know about your high poly. I think anyone who's very familiar with Photoshop, Photoshop masking and layers can do really well in Substance as long as they learn like the specifics of the program itself. But a lot of it is just building up masks and layers, different grunge maps, getting dirt where there should be dirt, darkening areas, using curve maps to put some wear in, adding text, adding a little bit of emission at the very end. One thing I want to talk about real quick is ID maps. They can be baked in Substance Painter or Marmoset, and they make texturing go so much faster. And if you have the ability to use ID maps, you absolutely should. So this is what the ID map for this material looks like, and where this comes from is in Marmoset or in Substance Painter, all of the bake groups get their own individual color. So if I were to see like this bake group called main here ends up getting a color, and that color happens to be this blue, this darker blue. What that lets us do, for example, is if I were to add in a fill layer and a black mask, I can add a color selection, and then I just get a color picker. I just get to say, I want this to just go on that, and it does. It is so good. Um, it makes things so much less of a pain. Then once you're done in here, you can go and export. I export everything I do basically with PBR metallic roughness, and then I have it set to do an OpenGL map instead of a DirectX. By default, you'll have this profile, PBR metallic roughness. Its normal map is in DirectX format by default. Yeah, pretty sure right there. But I've just duplicated it and I've set it to instead use normal OpenGL. And if what you're making doesn't have any rigging or shape keys or animations, that's pretty much it. You'd set up your materials in Blender, Unity, Unreal, Godot, whatever, and that's it. So what we're looking at here, these are all 2K maps. It still looks pretty good, I think. I'm pretty happy with it. And this is eventually going to be a VR chat asset, so I was really making sure I could get the material count down and the texture size as small as possible with it still looking nice. Quick note on high poly and then making the low poly. Doesn't always have to be that way. If you're pretty clever, you can make the low poly first and then build the high poly out of that. So right here, real quick, I'm just going to make a flashlight. I don't know, I'm just making something pretty quick and dirty. Right, nothing too crazy. Just some flashlight with a button. So if I stop here and say before I continue with this, I duplicate it. There's my low poly done. I've decided that this is the main overall shape of what I'm making, and I'm going to add all of my details to this. So I can go in here and I can make some grip details. And sure, that's like some kind of flashlight, I guess. And I now have all of my nice details, and I have my low poly already basically ready to go. To be honest, I might even like, just to make the low poly even more low poly. And then you did both of those steps in one go. So if you can do something like that, you should. It definitely saves a lot of time. I just wanted to point that out because you don't always have to make your high poly and then go back. Sometimes if it's something that you don't really know how to build up in low poly, or if it's made out of a lot of different shapes, it's a better idea to start with the high poly and then go back. But you don't always have to do it that way. So it wasn't a super detailed tutorial, just sort of a big picture culmination of me teaching myself, talking to people in AAA game development, and hundreds of hours of watching tutorials. I hope you got something out of it. If you did, let me know. If you see anything I can improve, let me know. I have a few more ideas for some other things I'm going to cover in the future, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.